Hi everyone, I'm Andy, and this is the AI Breakdown. Welcome to your weekly news edition, where I'll cover what happened in AI last week and why it matters. Let's start with Anthropic, because this was one of those weeks where a company managed to dominate the news cycle in two completely different ways. On the good news side, it shipped Claude Opus 4.7 and a new Claude Code feature called Routines. On the bad news side, it reminded everyone that a model can get more useful and more expensive at the same time. Opus 4.7 is now live across Claude itself, the API, Amazon Bedrock, Google Vertex AI, and Microsoft Foundry. Anthropic says the model is better at software engineering, better at instruction following, better at long-running agent work, and now supports higher resolution images up to 2,576 pixels, or 3.75 megapixels. It also adds new effort controls and task budgets, so developers can trade speed for deliberation and set a token target for a full agent loop. That sounds incremental, and in one sense it is, but useful AI often arrives like that. No fireworks. Just another set of practical frictions removed. The more interesting bit, for me, is routines. Anthropic launched it in research preview inside the redesigned Claude Code desktop app for Mac and Windows. A routine is basically a saved Claude Code setup. Your prompt, your repositories, your connectors, all bundled together and then run automatically on Anthropic's cloud infrastructure. So instead of Claude helping you in a live session on your machine, it can keep going overnight or while you're offline. Anthropic launched Claude Managed Agents just a week earlier on the 8th of April, indicating a clear pattern. This is the same pattern again, but applied to coding workflows, marking a meaningful shift as Claude transitions from assistant to runtime. That matters, because once routines run on Anthropic's infrastructure, you're no longer just buying a model, you're buying a place where work happens. And to me, that's the bigger shift. The labs aren't only fighting to be the smartest model anymore, they're fighting to become the operating layer where teams actually run tasks. If Anthropic owns that layer, it doesn't need to replace every CI tool. It just needs to siphon off the jobs people are tired of scripting by hand. There is, though, a slightly annoying catch. Anthropic kept the headline, Opus 4.7 priced the same, at $5 per million input tokens and $25 per million output tokens. Lovely. Except that the new tokenizer can consume roughly 1 to 1.35 times as many tokens for the same text. Finout and others did the maths, and the real cost per task can rise by as much as about 35%. Others have framed it as more like a 15 to 25% effective increase on many real workloads, especially code-heavy or non-English ones. My read is that the product work here is genuinely strong. Routines in particular feels important because it removes a very real friction point, but if you're running enterprise workloads on Opus 4.7, don't take the sticker price at face value. Model your actual usage mix carefully, especially if your workloads are code-heavy or multilingual. Otherwise, you'll be having a perfectly cheerful meeting about innovation right up until finance questions, why the token bill appears unusually high. This episode is sponsored by Notify Technology, a health and safety software partner, helping teams run incident management, audits and inspections, and risk assessments in one place. And with Notify Spark, their AI companion, they're streamlining incident reporting and investigations, saving time, reducing admin load, and helping teams act faster on what matters. Learn more at notifytechnology.com. Staying with Anthropic, the next move was even more direct. On the 17th of April, it launched Claude Design in research preview for Claude Pro, Max, Team, and Enterprise subscribers. This move isn't subtle, it's a clear shot at Figma. Claude Design lets users create designs, prototypes, slides, one-pages, mock-ups, and landing pages from natural language prompts, uploaded files, or even pointers to an existing codebase. It can read a team's code and design files to build a house style automatically, pull elements from live websites, let people refine outputs through conversation or direct edits, and then export the result to Canva, PDF, PPTX, or standalone HTML, and when the design is ready to build, Claude can package it into a handoff bundle for Claude Code. That's the feature worth dwelling on. Anthropic isn't just making a design tool, It's trying to close the gap between idea, prototype, and implementation. The timing made the competitive intent impossible to miss. 3 days before launch, Anthropic's Chief Product Officer Mike Krieger resigned from Figma's board. The same day the information reported, Anthropic's next model would include design tools that compete with Figma's core product. VentureBeat picked up the sequence straight away, and honestly, you didn't need to be Sherlock Holmes to see what was going on. If your CPO leaves Figma's board on Monday and you launch a Figma-adjacent product on Thursday, you've stopped pretending this is competition. What I think Anthropic has spotted is that the market is splitting in two. Traditional design tools sell control, AI design tools sell completion, and completion is what most non-designers actually want. They don't care about nudging every element by 4 pixels. They want something presentable by lunch. That's why this matters. Anthropic isn't really coming for elite designers first. It's coming for all the people who create visual work as a side quest. And that's a much bigger group than the design industry likes to admit. And because it hooks into Claude Code, Anthropic gains a compounding advantage. The design can inherit from your existing code base, and the handoff can seamlessly integrate into the coding workflow. That's a tough match for a standalone design tool. Figma has its own AI features, of course, but Anthropic is making a platform argument here. Why stop at mockups if the same system can also turn them into working artifacts? I wouldn't overstate it. Professional designers are not about to bin Figma because a chatbot can create a neat one-pager. Precision craft still matters, but this doesn't need to win the entire design market to be significant. It only needs to conquer the growing slice of quick-turn, good-enough visual work done by non-designers. And if Anthropic can make inroads there, more SaaS categories start to look contestable. Design today, perhaps project tools, knowledge tools, and bits of CRM tomorrow. That's when incumbents begin to feel very uncomfortable. In a few weeks, we may look back on this as the moment when cyber models became a proper competitive category. On the 14th of April, OpenAI launched GPT 5.4 Cyber, a version of GPT 5.4 tuned for defensive cybersecurity work. It came exactly 7 days after Anthropic launched Project Glasswing around Claude Mythos, which we covered last week. So this wasn't OpenAI inventing a new idea overnight, but it absolutely was OpenAI deciding that if Anthropic was going to define the narrative around frontier cyber defense, it wasn't going to leave that lane uncontested for long. OpenAI is distributing GPT 5.4 Cyber through its Trusted Access for Cyber program. It launched that program in February, and now it's expanding it to thousands of verified defenders and hundreds of teams responsible for critical software. The model is designed for defenders and includes capabilities like binary reverse engineering, which means analyzing compiled software for malware or vulnerabilities without needing the source code. OpenAI also says its codex security work has already helped fix over 3,000 critical and high-severity vulnerabilities. That's a very deliberate number to present to the market. It's OpenAI demonstrating defensive impact. The more significant shift is philosophical. OpenAI is moving away from the old idea that risk is mainly reduced by constraining capability. The new concept is trusted access. In other words, build a stronger system and focus your efforts on controlling who gets to use it. OpenAI expressed this shift outright in its launch note. Trusted access is replacing capability restriction as the main safety control. That might prove to be the right model, though it may also be a bit optimistic. Since the whole initiative hinges on the quality of vetting, the moment a verified researcher turns out to be a front for someone less wholesome, or credentials get compromised, the situation could shift dramatically. Still, from a market perspective, the headline is crystal clear. Cybersecurity now stands as a benchmark battlefield for frontier labs, on par with coding and reasoning, and for enterprise security teams, this is no longer a one-vendor conversation. You can now compare Anthropic's tighter partner model with OpenAI's broader trusted access approach. My instinct is that this becomes a standard launch template from here, not just a vague mention of security, but a proper cyber package, benchmark claims, a vetted access program, and a named set of defender partners. Once one lab does that, and the other matches it within a week, it stops being a side story and becomes part of the Frontier playbook. Now for the awkward Anthropic segment, because the same company that had a great product week also managed to irritate a lot of its most committed users. First came the backlash over what users called nerfing. Fortune laid out the complaints in some detail, and if you've spent any time around Claude Power users recently, none of it will sound unfamiliar. Developers said Claude Code was making more syntax mistakes and getting worse at multi-file reasoning. Researchers and writers said it felt lazier, with more superficial answers and less willingness to think through a problem. Fortune said those complaints had been building for weeks, which is why the reaction landed so hard. The term nerfing sounds a bit melodramatic, but the underlying complaint was simple. Something that used to feel sharp no longer felt quite as sharp. Anthropic's Boris Cherny then confirmed the key point. The company had reduced Claude's default effort setting to medium, after feedback that it was using too many tokens per task. That means some of the perceived degradation was real, maybe not all of it. Model users are prone to confirmation bias and nostalgia, same as the rest of us. But if you quietly reduce how hard the model tries by default, you don't get to act shocked when people notice. The real problem wasn't the change, it was the communication. Anthropic has spent 2 years building a reputation as the grown-up lab, the careful lab, the one that enterprise buyers could trust. Silent changes to effort levels cut against that image. And then Anthropic confirmed a big pricing change on the 16th of April. Claude Enterprise is moving away from the old flat monthly seat price. Now it's a tiered seat model. Usage is billed at standard API rates. The old discounts are going away, and customers have to commit to monthly consumption upfront. The information reported that for some heavy users, costs could potentially triple. Put these pieces together and the pattern is clear. New tokenizer in Opus 4.7, reduced default effort, usage-based billing, removed discounts. Anthropic is trying to manage demand, protect margins, and pass more variability through to customers. The big issue, in my view, is that Anthropic seems to be spending trust to buy economic breathing room. Each move is defensible on its own, but taken together, they tell customers the quiet part out loud: frontier AI is still supply constrained, and when the economics bite, the easiest lever is the customer. That's dangerous for Anthropic in particular, because trust isn't a nice extra in its brand. It's their brand. Right, let's rattle through a few more stories before we wrap up. Meta and Broadcom have extended their custom AI silicon partnership through 2029, with Meta committing more than 1 gigawatt of custom chip capacity as the opening move in a larger multi-gigawatt build-out. The important bit isn't just the deal size. Meta said the work spans design, packaging, and networking for several generations of its MTIA chips, which emphasizes their seriousness. It's that Meta is building real hardware optionality alongside NVIDIA and AMD, and Broadcom chief Hock Tan is stepping off Meta's board to avoid the obvious conflict mess as that relationship deepens. Snap cut about 1,000 jobs, or 16% of its workforce, and said AI now generates more than 65% of new code at the company. CNBC noted the stock jumped about 7% on the news, and Snap said it expects more than $500 million in annualized cost savings by the second half of 2026, which tells you the market likes an AI efficiency story very much indeed. Whether 65% of code means anything like 65% of engineering effort is another matter. Cursor is reportedly in talks to raise at a roughly $50 billion valuation, with a projected run rate above $6 billion by the end of 2026. That's a remarkable number for an AI coding company. At this point, AI coding is truly the first application layer in this new AI world to become a real market in its own right. Salesforce used TDX to unveil Agent Exchange, which bundles App Exchange, Slack Marketplace, and its agent ecosystem into one AI searchable marketplace with about 13,600 pre-built assets. Salesforce also paired that with a $50 million Builders Initiative for partners. So this isn't just a tidy rebrand of existing listings. That's Salesforce trying to ensure that if software shifts from apps to agents, it still owns the shopfront. A very Salesforce move. Quite sensible, really. And finally, DeepSeek is seeking outside funding for the first time, reportedly looking for at least $300 million at a valuation above $10 billion. On its own, that would be a financing story, but paired with the expected V4 release and a Huawei-based infrastructure plan, it's really a compute sovereignty story. China isn't just building models, it's trying to own more of the stack. That's all for this week's AI Roundup. If you found value in this breakdown, please leave a rating and hit subscribe. See you next week.